For almost 8 years now, fans have been begging for Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD to make their way to the Switch from the Wii U. There have been countless rumors, so much fan speculation, and yet none of it has ever materialized into either of these games actually being freed from Wii U jail. So today I want to talk about why that might be. Why haven't we seen either of these obvious Wii U games come over to the Switch? We've seen so many Wii U ports on this console. Just in a couple of days here, we're getting Xenoblade Chronicles X, a definitive edition, but for some reason, two of the most obvious ones, being Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD, for some reason, those games haven't come over. So today I want to talk about why that might be, and why I think there actually is a problem Nintendo is facing when trying to figure out when to deploy these games. When does it make sense to actually re-release them? Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo, Zelda, Switch 2, speculation, theories, discussion, all that fun stuff, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Alrighty folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope your day is going well. It's been a while since I've talked about Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD in depth, why we haven't seen them, and I thought once and for all I should do like a final video before we hopefully see these games in the coming months, fingers crossed, but also today we're going to be talking about why I think we won't see them in the very near future at the very least, and that is all because of this problem that I think Nintendo is actually facing, and that is when it comes to figuring out when to release them. I think if we were going to see these games on Switch, it probably would have already happened, especially in the case of Twilight Princess HD, but I do think we will get them eventually, and before we dive any further, I do want to say I think these games do exist. I think Nintendo does have both of these games ready to go as Wii U ports on the Switch. It's just a matter of trying to figure out when to release them. And you might be thinking to yourself, Bo, that is ridiculous. If these games do exist, if they are being developed, or if they are being sat on, we would have either seen them by now, or we will see them in the very near future. We know that Nintendo likes to sit on games very unlike any other publisher in this industry, where Metroid Prime Remastered was rumored for so long to be finished. Eventually, it did pop up as a shadow drop one day. Fire Emblem Engage is another great example of a game that we had heard was finished before it was even announced, like a year before, I want to say even. So Nintendo is no stranger to sitting on games. However, despite the fact that I think they have ported these to Switch, and I do think a lot of the rumors actually were pretty reliable in the reporting on these two specifically, I think there is a problem, and that problem is trying to figure out for Nintendo, like, when they can slot them in. Because if you aren't familiar with Zelda's typical release schedule, with their release cadence, usually we get one. We usually get one Zelda game every single year, without fail. There are a couple of exceptions to this. I made a handy-dandy chart here going over all of the major Zelda releases from the past decade. And as you can see here, Zelda is a very consistent series, next to really only Mario and I guess Pokemon for Nintendo, and maybe Kirby as well, although we get a lot more spin-offs in terms of Kirby. So in 2015, we had Triforce Heroes on 3DS. In 2016, we had one of those rare years where we got two games, but that is back when Nintendo had two very distinct platforms, being the 3DS and the Wii U. We had Hyrule Warriors Legends, as well as Twilight Princess HD back in 2016. 2017 saw the release of Breath of the Wild. 2018 saw the release of Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. 2019, another rare year where there were two releases, Cadence of Hyrule, an indie game kind of partnership from Nintendo and Brace Yourself Games, as well as the remake of Link's Awakening from Grezzo. 2020 saw Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity release from Koei Tecmo. 2021 saw the release of Skyward Sword HD, developed by Tantalus. 2022, very interesting year here where we had no new release from the Zelda franchise. However, Tears of the Kingdom was originally planned to be a 2022 game, but that got pushed to May of 2023, as you can see here. And then in 2024, just a few months ago, we got Echoes of Wisdom from Grezzo, their first fully new 2D Zelda game. Now, the reason I mention this, the reason I bring it up, is because despite being annualized, I still think there is so much Zelda coming on the horizon on Switch 2 that finding the time for them to put Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD in there is going to be extremely hard. Now, this will change a little bit depending on if you think they will sell them separately. I am firmly in the camp that I think Wind Waker and Twilight Princess would be separate games, and a big reason for that is Skyward Sword HD. While it didn't light the sales charts on fire, it did still sell over 4 million copies. It sold better than the original, and that is the Zelda game that has been hated on for all of time. Ever since Skyward Sword came out back in 2011, a lot of people have been very vocal about not liking that game. It was when the 3D Zelda formula was tired, which is why we have Breath of the Wild now. If they can get away with selling that for $60, I would be flabbergasted if Nintendo was like, yeah, let's sell Wind Waker HD for $30 and Twilight Princess HD for $30. We bundle them together for $60. No, these are two fan-favorite Zelda games, Wind Waker HD especially. They are almost certainly going to sell them for full price, a la carte, $60 each. I would love if they did a bundle pack, but that's just not the Nintendo we're dealing with here. Releasing them separately also just kind of gives them both more time to breathe, more time in the spotlight. It helps fill out Nintendo's calendar more when having a new release every single month is so important to how their business strategy works, keeping their users engaged with first-party software. Releasing two critically acclaimed Zelda games on the same day, even if they are old games, just doesn't really, I don't think that makes sense. So if they're going to release them separately for full price, this makes it even harder trying to figure out when they can slot them in, which brings me to this. We understand that there is a Zelda game every year. With rare exception, there is more than one. There have been so many different games speculated and rumored to be coming to the Switch 2, and based on development timelines, I think we can make pretty safe assumptions on when a lot of these games will actually release. So to demonstrate what I mean when I say there's a problem with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess specifically, I want to slot in a Zelda game every year. I have 8 box arts here that we need to fit in to 5 years. These are all heavily requested, heavily rumored, and heavily speculated games from the Zelda community. There are definitely some here that I don't think will happen. There are some here that I'm very confident will happen, but we only have 5 years. For this section, I want to actually work our way backwards, so we'll start with 2D Zelda. Grezzo just released Echoes of Wisdom. I think it's safe to say it's going to be a while before we see another 2D Zelda game, unless another developer is brought into the mix, maybe as specifically a remake developer again, as Grezzo has now been kind of given the freedom to make a new game. Maybe we'll see a sequel to Echoes of Wisdom that once again stars Zelda in the main leading role. But either way, whatever the 2D Zelda game coming next is, I think it's pretty safe to say this is 2029. If it's an Oracle's remake or maybe Minish Cap remake, maybe it's a little bit sooner than that. Maybe that slots in somewhere like here or here, if Grezzo's doing it, if another team's doing it. But honestly, I think it will be a while before we see a 2D Zelda game again, just based on the fact that we literally just got Echoes of Wisdom. And there was a 5-year gap, I want to say, between Link's Awakening remake and Echoes of Wisdom. So honestly, I think 2029, as crazy as that sounds, I think that's pretty realistic when expecting the release year for the next 2D Zelda game, be that new, be that a remake. Next up is the matter of the next mainline 3D Zelda game. Now, I'm going to do a full dedicated video on this game and why I think we will actually see it, well, let's just say very soon. But that doesn't necessarily mean I think it's coming out anytime soon. Tears of the Kingdom was supposedly finished development in early 2022. For that final year, they were kind of just polishing things up, but it was constant complete and mostly just, bug fixing, all that for the final 12 months of development. So if the bulk of that game's development was done in, let's just say, May of 2022. I think the absolute earliest we could see the next 3D Zelda game is 2027. However, I am going to slot it in 2028. That is 5 years after Tears of the Kingdom released, 6 years after it was mostly finished development. So I think 2028, maybe that's a bit optimistic. Maybe it will be a little bit later than that, but maybe you swap these two, that kind of thing. Put 3D Zelda in 2029, but I'm going to put the next 3D Zelda in 2028. I also think that's important because we have the Zelda movie coming, and while Nintendo doesn't necessarily have to have synergy with their releases, based on the fact that they haven't filmed that movie yet, the earliest I think we can expect it is 2027, so I'm going to say 2028 for the movie, and alongside it, that's when we get the next 3D Zelda. They might even announce it for 2027. You know how Nintendo likes to announce these things too early, put a year on it too early, and then they push it, they delay it. So I would say 2028 for this. And this is where it starts getting really tricky, because we have 5 more games here, 3 years left, and honestly, I could see every single one of these releasing in the next 6 months. I think all of these games could either be extremely imminent or extremely far away. It is important for Nintendo to have a Zelda game on Switch 2 in the first year. I firmly believe that. I've talked about that ad nauseum. So I think there will be a Zelda game announced in the Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd, and I think it will release this year. And it really could be any of these 3 games. Ocarina of Time Remake has been speculated by the community for so long. I want to believe it's real, and I do think it makes sense for them to do. However, I think if we're getting Ocarina of Time remake, that's going to come a little later. We'll put that in 2027 for now. Maybe once again, maybe that's kind of more of a movie synergy thing. They want to have that a little closer to the movie. There's also the heavily rumored Breath of the Wild 4K remaster. Supposedly, they showed it off to developers at Gamescom 2023. We also heard from washed up leaker Midori that there was a project codename. I think it was Yu King O, which, you know, say what you will about Midori. I don't like talking about them too much. Their information was reliable. Their codenames have been reliable so far. So if that is the case, a 4K patch or re-release of Breath of the Wild, I would say, is basically a lock. Now, whether or not they treat this as a major new release, they give it a new box release, put it on retail shelves for $70, $60, that remains to be seen. Maybe it's a free upgrade. I really don't know. But once again, given how Nintendo is and how they like to really charge up their remasters, I think it would be a full release. I think they would prop it up as a major title in their calendar, as boring as that might be to some people. I just think given their history, that kind of makes the most sense. So this one could be this year. Maybe it'd be a quieter release, but maybe we see it this year. Though if they want to have a Zelda game announced and released this year as marketing in, you know, kind of conjunction with the Switch 2, you want to have a Zelda game there because it's a system seller. You want to have new Zelda stuff happening. A remaster of Breath of the Wild is a pretty lackluster way of doing that. So honestly, I'm going to put Breath of the Wild 4K here. We'll put it to the side a little bit though, because I think it'd be like an early year release, maybe a lower stakes one where they don't even market it that much, but it's still a game that will sell a ton of copies, and it would be, you know, good to have that on store shelves for families and all that. It's going to sell a lot of copies, even if, you know, most of us don't really care. Which leaves us with these three games to kind of play around with here: Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, and a new Hyrule Warriors game. I have it saying The Imprisoning War here. I really hope it's not a Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom themed Warriors again. I hope we get a sequel to Hyrule Warriors from 2014, where it is an amalgamation of all the different iterations of Link and all the different iterations of Zelda, and we get a crossover, a true crossover game again. I talked about it in my video the other day, predicting the entirety of the Switch 2's first year, as well as the rest of the Switch 1 games for this year. I think Hyrule Warriors is the game for this year. Maybe Nintendo could surprise me and they swap Ocarina all the way over here, like maybe, and that could be their impressive showpiece game. But the issue with Ocarina is I don't even know who would be making it. Frankly, even putting it on this image and talking about it is kind of hopium. There have been some comments from Aonuma that would seem to suggest Ocarina's happening. There are a couple different things that you could maybe view as evidence to there being something coming for Ocarina of Time, be it all of the different references and echoes of wisdom, be it the Lego Great Deku Tree sets. I do think it makes sense, given how much clamoring there is for classic 3D Zelda to make a comeback, but also given how much more the open air Zelda games sell, I don't think we're going to get a new classic 3D Zelda game. So one of the best ways they can appease that part of the fan base is with an Ocarina of Time remake. I mean, that would do extremely well, even being a traditional 3D Zelda game. And then, yeah, Hyrule Warriors, we are due for another Nintendo Warriors game. I honestly hope it's not Hyrule Warriors. I think Age of Calamity is extremely mid. I love 2018 and 2014 Hyrule Warriors. Even Legends on 3DS is fun. I love Fire Emblem Warriors. I would love a Xenoblade Warriors. I've been hoping for that for a very long time, and I don't know if this year makes the most sense for it, given we just got Xenoblade Chronicles X, but we actually have the longest gap right now we've ever had between Nintendo Warriors crossovers. The last one was Three Hopes back in 2022. We are overdue. We are overdue for a new Warriors game, and we're talking about a new Zelda game that they can promote alongside the Switch 2. Even if it is a Warriors game, they can show the nice 4K cutscenes of Link and Zelda and Ganondorf and all that. A Hyrule Warriors game this year, I really think, makes just a lot of sense. It also kind of mimics what we had in 2017 with Fire Emblem Warriors. I think we get a new Warriors game every year one on the console. This could even be cross-gen, honestly. This could be a Switch 1 and Switch 2 game. We saw Fire Emblem Warriors come to new 3DS and Switch at the same time. Maybe we see a similar thing here with this game. And as you can see here, this doesn't really leave much space for Wind Waker or Twilight Princess. Now, this is all my own speculation. Maybe Hyrule Warriors doesn't even exist. Maybe Breath of the Wild 4K. Maybe the rumors are wrong and they haven't play tested it and there isn't an active development version of that game for Switch 2. Maybe they won't release it. Maybe it was just for development testing purposes. Maybe Ocarina of Time remake doesn't exist. Maybe 3D Zelda is further off than 2028. But when we look at how the series has been treated in the past, when we look at all the different spin-offs and release cadences of the remasters, I think this is kind of what we're looking at here. 2025, Hyrule Warriors, Breath of the Wild, 2026, Ocarina, 2027, 3D Zelda, 2028, and whatever the next 2D Zelda game is, be that remake, be that a new game, for 2029. With that being said, we are in an interesting spot for Nintendo, where they're going to have 2 consoles acting at once. And once again, just pulling up the image showing every release from 2015 onward, there was a year towards the end of the 3DS and Wii U's life where we got 2 Zelda games. They were both remasters, or I guess one was a demaster kind of, but we had the ports of Hyrule Warriors to the 3DS as well as Twilight Princess HD on the Wii U. Could we see Wind Waker HD this year and then also Hyrule Warriors? I think that is possible. However, I do think Breath of the Wild makes more sense to remaster than that game. Breath of the Wild on Switch 2, this is going to sound insane to some people. This will sell better than either of these games. Honestly, it might sell better than them combined. Breath of the Wild is just a juggernaut. It still sells a ton every single quarter. Every time we get new sales numbers from Nintendo, I'm always surprised to see how well Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are still doing. So if they want a game that's going to sell a lot, it makes more sense to get Breath of the Wild out there earlier than Wind Waker HD. And also, I just feel like if we do this, let's say Wind Waker HD is like mid-2025, Hyrule Warriors on Switch 2, that's a fall release this year. 2026 is Breath of the Wild. I mean, we're talking a lot of time between new games here. This is the issue with game development timelines now. Like, there's going to be a lot of remasters and maybe some spin-offs before we get something new, because we got Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom back to back. So I worry there will be fatigue if they slot all of these in here like this. I mean, good lord. Wind Waker HD, a remaster. Hyrule Warriors, a spin-off. Breath of the Wild 4K, a remaster. Twilight Princess HD, a remaster. Ocarina of Time, maybe this doesn't exist, but either way, another remake before what I would say is really the earliest we could see a new 3D Zelda being 2028. There's an issue here. We're going to get a lot of spin-offs and a lot of remasters before we get a new game again. So I don't know where these two really make that much sense. Maybe 2026 it looks like this or something, where we get Wind Waker at the first half of the year. Breath of the Wild could be the fall game for 2026 or something like that. But you're still kind of running into the issue of just so many remasters in a row. That's, I wonder, man. I just wonder, when can they slot these in? Even with Skyward Sword, you know, I talked about how that game sold more than the Wii version. I have a feeling, and this is all based on speculation, I have a feeling they were probably disappointed in how that game did. It was the first major 3D Zelda game released after Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild sold 30 million copies. I think there are people at Nintendo who were maybe expecting that game to have a bigger pop following the success of Breath of the Wild, when in reality, it just kind of did what it did. It did what 3D Zelda usually does, somewhere in that 3 to 5 million range. And I feel like releasing Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, like, while I think these games will do better than Skyward Sword HD, if you release them all back to back, you're gonna have fatigue of just remasters. There's too many remasters. At least with the previous 10 years of Zelda, we had Triforce Heroes, we had Breath of the Wild, we had Cadence of Hyrule. Basically every year or every other year, there was something new to break up all of the ports and remasters. But when we're looking at this timeline here, it's looking weird. It's looking weird, and I don't know how fans will react to this many remasters if this is indeed kind of the roadmap we're looking at here for the future of these Zelda games. So, to sum it all up, I just don't know where Wind Waker and Twilight Princess fit in. I do think Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD exist. I do think they've ported them to the Switch, but honestly, I mean, I wish they had put them out in 2022, you know? And maybe that is evidence against these even existing, because if they did, that would have been the perfect time to release them when they didn't have a game coming out. But with all of these different games rumored and speculated, I'm just not sure where they fit in, you know? I'm really not. But if we are going to get any of them soon, I think Wind Waker would be first, and maybe it would be this year before Hyrule Warriors, just to, you know, kind of once again have a remaster, then a new thing, then a remaster, then Ocarina, you know, it's a remake, but it is a bigger deal. Then maybe you put Twilight Princess here. I don't know, man. It's so many remasters. It kind of feels like there might be an issue here. And also, to be honest, this is an entirely different topic, but if we do get Ocarina of Time remake, that stands to reason we would get Majora's Mask remake. And given how Twilight Princess is one of the more successful 3D Zelda games, and the fact that, in my opinion, it has aged the worst out of really probably any 3D Zelda game, at least when you count the 3DS remakes of the N64 games, I could see a timeline where it's Ocarina remake, then Majora remake, and then Twilight Princess HD Remake, and maybe they don't even ever release this, to be honest. Wind Waker already looks really good. It hasn't aged that poorly. I don't think you really need to mess with it. Twilight Princess HD in a post-Ocarina Remake world is gonna look so rough. But that is gonna do it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think Nintendo will do with these Wii U or GameCube remasters, depending on how you want to look at it? When do you think they slot them in? Because when we're talking about Hyrule Warriors, Breath of the Wild, Ocarina Remake, 3D Zelda, 2D Zelda, like, I just don't know. I don't know when they slot them in. While also trying to avoid oversaturation of new Zelda releases. It's a tricky situation for the Zelda team to be in, but it's also a good thing for us because I think it does mean we will be getting, at minimum, one Zelda game every single year for the rest of the 2020s, which is exciting. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, subscribe here for more Zelda content, Nintendo content, Switch 2 content, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my other channel at It's Amiibo. And as always, you can click on one of these two videos to continue listening to me ramble about Nintendo stuff. Until next time, folks, peace.